Welcome back to a bit of gaming and another history video, this time on the English longbow called Longbows and Lances. Now growing up I learned that battles like Agincourt and Cressy were a load of English longbowmen firing longbows at shiny knights in armour, and they'd all get massacred by longbow arrows. And the general sort of theory behind it is originally the longbow was a Welsh thing, and after the Normans invaded and conquered England, they went on to Wales, and fighting in Wales they came across these longbows which could penetrate chainmail, and big battles, battles like Crug Mawr in Wales. I'll link a thing to the battle in the comments, where Norman knights in their chainmail. This is kind of early medieval mailed knights. They're getting like long range. They're getting hit with arrows through their chainmail, and that sparked them into trying to charge the Welsh. And in the kind of ensuing battle, they lost masses of guys charging them over muddy ground. So it's basically like a Welsh Norman version of Agincourt. I don't know how the poundage, the poundage on the bows is kind of rated by poundage, like how much pounds of pressure you need to bend them. So a kid's bow might be 20 pounds or something, and a full war bow might be 120. So I don't know what the poundage of the Welsh longbows were, but their experiences in Wales led the Normans to make a law that people in England, or yeomen in England, had to practice their longbow every Sunday or whatever it was, and in the process that would build up their muscles and their skeletons to be able to fire these massively powerful bows that an average person today wouldn't be able to pull, and that sort of explains the kind of weird sort of shape you see in old illustrations of English archers or whatever, in these kind of contorted sort of positions, because they're using their back muscles to pull the bow. Because you have what they're saying is that the left, assuming you are holding the bow with the left and pulling with the right, you're saying that the forearm your left forearm will get really strong. The bone in the actual physical bone in the on the forearm will just get thicker, and the right shoulder that's pulling the bow would get more muscly as well. But to say this weird posture, it's because it had to use to get to pull a 120-pound bow. You need to actually use all your back muscles as well. Hence these kind of weird shapes you see in all the old in the old illustrations, but also in modern longbow. People who practice with it, and people who can pull fire a 120-pound bow 5 or 6 times a minute. They have to use the back. So anyway, that was the idea that you got growing up. They say that it's a special kind of bow that is really difficult to pull, but if you practice with it from like the age of 12 with you get a 30-pound bow at 12 or whatever it was, and then you go up to a 40, then a 60 as you got bigger and stronger, and as your muscles and your skeleton physically change your skeleton to the point where you could finally pull a 120-pound war bow. And you had to pull it in this kind of shape because you're using your back muscles. So that was the end result, that the English stole an invention from the Welsh and maybe improved it, made the poundage even higher, and with regular training made themselves capable of firing a much heavier poundage version. And that thanks to that bit of cleverness, you basically machine gun armoured knights, but with medieval machine gun, otherwise known as a longbow. So that was the theory. But then a bunch of people went and spoiled it by actually testing the theory. They got high poundage bows, someone who knew how to fire one, proper arrows, and fired arrows at plate armour. and they found, oops, it didn't actually work. He couldn't penetrate plate mail at all. Well, couldn't penetrate plate at all. So how come? How come? Because we know we know it happened. We know, at least as far as we know, Agincourt happened, and the longbows fired lots of arrows, and lots of knights came crashing down. So we know that, but we also now know that longbow arrows don't go through plate armour. So how come? One possibility might be the range. Like if the archers are hiding behind stakes, and the knights come up close but can't get through, then you're shooting them at point blank range. I don't know how likely it is. I don't think it is very likely, to be honest. But that's just one. That's one possibility that I don't think I've seen tested. But I don't think that's the main reason. There's two definitions of the word lance and also spear. It can mean the actual weapon itself, but it's also used at the time as a unit, as a name of a unit, as a kind of basic unit of a knight. And at its most simplest, the actual I think it's French saying, it's Lances, Fournies or whatever. I'll put a link in the comment section, so not going to be able to pronounce it properly. And at its most basic level, a lance, as a unit, was the knight and a sergeant and some pages or squires who may or may not actually have fought. They're just the servants really for carrying armour and stuff around. But the actual base minimum fighting unit was a knight and a sergeant, or he might have been a squire in some other context. But this is the thing that they had this guy. I think I forget the name of it. It's in the wiki article about Lance Fournies, and he's basically a sergeant. And that's that's the kind of the sort of simplest version of it. But if you imagine the different ranks of knights, you got a duke, might have a whole bunch of knights in their personal household, and a whole bunch of sergeants as well. So and a baron might have the same, but just smaller numbers. So this idea of this of the lance being just a knight and a sergeant, so that's the minimum, and others might be a baron with 4 knights and 6 sergeants or whatever. So what you're talking about in basic terms is that a unit of knights is made up of a sub-unit of lances, and those lances are full of sergeants. And on top of this whole distinction between knights and sergeants, you also got the ranking within knights as well. So like a duke is going to have the best possible armour of the time, and his household knights might have 1 or 2 grades lower, and his sergeants going to be 1 or 2 grades lower than that. A baron would have slightly less fancy armour than the duke, and then again same thing. He'd have his personal knights, and their armour is going to be slightly less good than the baron, and their sergeant's going to be 1 or 2 ranks lower armour as well. And then below them, you've got the regular knight, who might just have their own their sergeant in 1 grade lower armour, and at the bottom of the pile, you have poor knights who've got armour that was good 100 years earlier, handed down by the great granddad, and their sergeant might just be in padded armour. So if you're talking about this time, and longbows against shiny armour, not all the units, not all the knights, or rather not all the individuals in a unit of knights is going to have the shiny armour. The guys at the front might do, the dukes and the princes and the barons, all sitting at the front in the shiniest possible armour. But that's them. But in amongst all that lot, there's going to be a big variation in the armour. So you've got one load of guys standing there in their nice shiny armour, which is impervious to longbows. So that's the second thing. Is a lot of this armour has say it's all shiny, plate everywhere, and then you've got other people who've got bits of plate on top of bits of chainmail, and longbow arrows will go through chainmail. And then further back, you've got your sergeants, maybe bits of plate here and there, lots of chainmail, padded brigandines, whatever. So I think that's the root of the that's my opinion of the root of the issue, is that and particularly in terms of war games, you think in terms of units of knights and units of sergeants or whatever. Whereas I don't think it was like that. I think it was much more of a mixed bag. You got your knights, and you got the high status knights with the best armor, middle ranking knights with good armor but not necessarily the best, and then a load of sergeants with chainmail or padded, and depending on the era, because as you go forward in time, as the top status armor gets better, the second tier armor gets better as well. So you end up eventually with sergeants wearing lots of plate, but not always. So that's my guess as to what happened at Agincourt and Crazy, is that you got your dukes and barons at the front with the super duper armor, which couldn't get hit from couldn't be penetrated by a longbow. But behind them, you've got all the poor knights and sergeants and just chainmail, or bits of plate, what I call plate mail, chainmail with bits of plate on it. And the second component of that is the horse armor as well. Again, the dukes at the front might have plate armor on their horses, or just on the front half. Whereas people at the back might have just padded armor. And the other aspect of that, which is relevant to the horses, is if you've got a crossbow firing on a flat trajectory, and all the best armoured guys are at the front, with their half armoured horses, then they're pretty safe, relatively. Whereas longbows shooting up in the air and coming down again, it's getting the guys at the back, and it's getting the horses at the back as well. Or even the if the horses at the front have got plate armor on the front half, they're getting shot in the bum from these arrows coming down from above. So anyway, that's my answer to the conundrum of Agincourt happened, but the tests on plate armor say it didn't, or it couldn't. So that's my guess as to what actually happened, is that when they talk about a line of French knights, it's not actually a line of French knights. It's a mixture of knights and sergeants, and high status knights, poor knights, and sergeants. So anyway, in kind of war games terms, it would be like a unit of knights. So you have a row of knights at the front and a row of sergeants at the back. Would be your unit of knights. Effectively, knights against most enemy targets, because they're the ones at the front. But against people shooting up in the air and coming back down again, they count more as sergeants. I don't know how you do that in a game, but I think that's the gist, in my opinion. And the general point of that, which goes back to one of my recurring points on this historical stuff, is that for most of ancient and medieval history, most of the units are regional levies. So they're not like units in the way you think about it, or the way it's thought about in the war games and stuff like that, where you have a unit of axemen or a unit of warband or whatever. I think it's much more there's a local hierarchy, and the units levied from a region kind of mirror that hierarchy. So again, thinking in ancient terms, like a Gallic warband, you've got the chiefs and their bodyguards with armour at the front, regular guys, no armour, shield and spear at the back, and a kind of sub-unit of skirmishers at the front, and that, to my mind, is a unit. It's a warband which has got armoured guys at the front and unarmoured at the back, with a sub-unit of skirmishers. So in a similar kind of twisted sort of way, it's like a Napoleonic battalion with your grenadiers and your grenadier company and your skirmisher company and your main body of regular dudes. So that's how I see it, and it's not always the case, because you have like a split between like core and periphery sort of units. So you have You have mercenaries and royal household troops, which are maybe a bit different, or professional, like Roman soldiers, or mercenaries like Cretan archers or whatever, and they'd all be guys with bows, obviously. Numidian cavalry would be Numidian cavalry, but your regional levy will be a mixture of all these different things jumbled together. So lances and longbows. That's my take on that. You look to the bit.